She was elegance personified, a golden voice, a timeless face, and a life that lit up screens for nearly 5 decades. But when Vivienne Cole passed away in 2019, the world only thought they knew who she was. What they found after her death, hidden in attics, safes, and long-forgotten journals, would completely rewrite her legacy. This isn't just a story of a famous actress. It's the unraveling of a woman who built a perfect image, while hiding scars no one ever saw. Make sure to watch this video to the very end, and if this story moves you, give the video a like. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, so you will never miss an upload. Now, let's dive into the story. Born Geneva Hope Langley in a quiet suburb of Ottawa, Vivienne's beginnings were far from glamorous. Her father, Thomas Langley, was a night shift security guard who often came home smelling of cigarettes and wet pavement. Her mother, Elise, once a ballet dancer in Montreal, had given up her stage dreams to raise a family she never seemed fully prepared for. Geneva, or Jen, as her classmates called her, was a quiet child with a feverish imagination. While other girls played house, Geneva performed full monologues in her backyard to an audience of dandelions and squirrels. Her mother kept a worn copy of Shakespeare's Hamlet on the nightstand, and Jen would sneak it out at night to memorize passages by moonlight. School was a struggle, not for lack of intelligence, but because she didn't fit in. Her voice was too deep, her stares too intense. By 12, she'd been labeled weird. By 15, she'd written and starred in a school play about a queen who pretends to be poor so she can hear what people really say. At 18, Geneva left home with $40 in a coin purse and a grainy black and white headshot. She boarded a Greyhound bus to New York City with nothing but ambition in her suitcase. She never looked back. She arrived in New York and checked into a women's boarding house in Hell's Kitchen, where the scent of mildew clung to the walls like memory. She lied about her age to land waitressing jobs, took modeling gigs in Chinatown, and snuck into open auditions. One night, while riding in a cab back from an unpaid audition, the driver turned to her and said, "You look too French to be a Geneva. You look like a Vivienne. Vivienne Cole. That's a movie star name." She laughed, but the name stuck. Vivienne Cole was born that night. Not legally, not yet, but in spirit. Geneva Hope Langley became a ghost in her own life, tucked behind a curtain while Vivienne stepped onto the stage. Her first big break came not on screen, but behind a microphone. A casting director for an animated noir series heard her husky, melancholic tone during a workshop and offered her the lead voice role. The series aired on late-night cable and became a cult hit. Nobody knew who she was, but they knew that voice. Soon, her face followed. She starred in small independent films, always playing wounded women who knew too much. Critics called her the storm in a champagne glass. Directors called her unpredictable in the best way. Vivienne guarded her real self like a national secret. Her laugh was practiced. Her tears were rationed. Fame, to her, was a stage, but the applause only muffled the silence she carried inside. The 1980s were more than just neon lights and synthesizers. They were Vivienne Cole's decade. She became an emblem of elegance, an enigma, a muse to some, a mystery to most. If the 1970s had molded her, the 1980s carved her name in stone. Her breakout film, Winter Lace, premiered in 1982 and swept Indie Awards. She played a widow who faked her death to escape a mob-affiliated husband. Her performance was raw, vulnerable, haunted. Audiences couldn't look away. Neither could the press. Offers came flooding in. But she turned most of them down. Roles that required nudity for shock value, Gone. One-note women written by one-dimensional men? Not a chance. Vivienne's motto, written in the margins of her script binder, was simple. No woman is simple. She chose roles that terrified her. A grieving pianist who couldn't play anymore. A blind lawyer accused of murder. A duchess losing her grip on reality. Through it all, she wore tragedy like silk, not as weakness, but as armor. Off-screen, she was elusive. Her interviews were brief and enigmatic. She deflected personal questions with philosophical musings. One journalist described her as someone who answers every question as if it's a line from a play you're not invited to see. But beneath the cool facade, Vivienne was fighting battles few knew about. She had begun to experience recurring migraines, later diagnosed as stress-induced. She refused to let it affect her performance, popping painkillers before premieres, applying eyeliner with trembling fingers. Colleagues adored her, but feared her. She demanded excellence, resented shortcuts, and once fired a director mid-shoot for dismissing a crew member. Respect, she reportedly said, starts at the bottom of the call sheet. Tabloids painted her as difficult, but for those who truly worked with her, the word was committed. She never phoned it in, ever. And through all this, the fame, the tension, the pressure, Geneva Hope Langley remained buried beneath the persona. Vivienne Cole, the woman in silk gowns and stiletto heels, was a creation, a masterpiece. But even masterpieces can crack. The world saw her shine, but it never saw her break. It began in the fall of 1985, on the set of a film that would never be released. Vivienne was starring in a psychological thriller called The Orchard Keeper. The director, Charlotte Lynn, was already a rising star in the independent scene, a visionary with a fiery temper and a reputation for perfectionism. She and Vivienne were destined to clash. And they did. What started as artistic conflict soon became creative combustion. Every disagreement was followed by fascination. Every fight followed by flowers. By the time filming wrapped, the two women were inseparable. They never confirmed their relationship publicly. Paparazzi photos hinted at intimacy. The way Charlotte brushed Vivienne's coat sleeve. The way Vivienne looked at Charlotte like she was the only person in the room. But it was never spoken. In private. It was a decade of love and volatility. Charlotte was brilliant, but controlling. Vivienne was passionate, but wounded. They wrote scripts together, co-directed a short film, hosted salons in their Hollywood Hills home. But there were cracks. Vivienne once confided in her makeup artist, "I love her, but she wants to choreograph my breath." By 1995, it ended without warning. No statements. No public grief. Just silence. When Vivienne didn't show up to the indie film gala that year, rumors swirled. Drugs. A breakdown. None of it true. What was true was this. She didn't work for 2 years after Charlotte. Not in any meaningful way. She gave an interview in 1996. Brief, cryptic. When asked what she was doing with her time, she replied, "Listening to rooms. They remember more than people do." After her death, a journal was found with an entry dated August 1995. She wanted to own me. I just wanted someone who could see me. That one line, raw, honest, heartbreaking, said more than any press release ever could. During those 2 quiet years, Vivienne wrote obsessively. Stories, poems, screenplays with titles like The Quietest War and Glass Hotel. None were ever published. But her estate found them. Dozens of binders, yellowed and brittle, ink smudged from tears. She was a woman remaking herself again, but this time not for screen. This time for survival. The late 1990s marked a slow, almost imperceptible descent. The parts dwindled. The offers weren't as grand. But it wasn't the fading spotlight that hurt the most. It was the silence. Vivienne had always had an intuitive fear of stillness. Now, that fear surrounded her. A freak accident during a stunt on the set of an indie film left her with a herniated disc. Surgery was successful, but recovery was brutal. What followed was a prescription for painkillers, then stronger ones, then more. Friends began to notice the change. Vivienne, once radiant and restless, became subdued. Her sentences grew shorter, her eyes heavier. At award shows, she wore sunglasses indoors. At interviews, she'd cancel last minute or offer curt, polite answers. One reporter described her as a whisper in heels. She gave fewer performances. The ones she did give lacked the electricity of her earlier work. Critics said she lost her edge. But behind the scenes, she was just lost, unknown to even her closest circle. Vivienne had kept a storage unit in Silver Lake. After her death, investigators and estate handlers found over 40 unopened scripts there. Some were massive Oscar-bait dramas, international thrillers, even a franchise reboot. Tucked into the margins of the folders were post-it notes. Too much pain. Not ready. Hurts to read. In one corner of the storage unit, they found a box labeled letters I never sent. Inside, over 70 handwritten letters to directors, friends, even fan club members. Most of them apologized for pulling away. One letter, dated 2004, simply read, "I'm sorry I wasn't who you needed me to be." Vivienne was not forgotten by the industry, but she was no longer a darling. Hollywood is cold to those who can no longer serve it. And Vivienne, for the first time in her life, was not giving. She was withdrawing. Yet even in this darkness, she created. Poems scribbled in the backs of pill bottles. Dialogue written on napkins. An unpublished memoir under the pseudonym L. Fallow. Those who saw her in her final years describe her as fragile but lucid, sharp, even just quieter. Her home, once lively with parties and salon nights, grew still. Her phone stopped ringing. Her laughter, once musical and uncontrollable, was replaced with quiet hums, usually of Debussy, sometimes Satie. And still, she wrote, in silence, in pain, in defiance of the image she once embodied. Vivienne Cole, the woman whose voice defined an era, was now whispering only to herself. It was just a cassette, old, dust-covered, and labeled in Vivienne's neat handwriting. Play after I'm gone. Sophie Cole, her niece and closest living relative, remembered hesitating before pressing play. The room had been silent. The windows opened just enough for the Los Angeles wind to breathe through the curtains. Then came that unmistakable voice, raspy, rich, still regal. "Hi, if you're hearing this, I guess I'm not around anymore. I've tried to record this more times than I'll admit, so forgive the pauses, the breaks." What followed was 28 minutes of raw reflection. She spoke not as a star, but as a woman, a daughter, a lover, a soul who had spent too long playing everyone but herself. The truth is, I never really knew what people saw in me. I spent half my life trying to control the story, and the other half pretending I didn't care how it ended. She spoke of Charlotte Lynn, of how their relationship had changed her forever, and how she regretted never fully explaining why she left. She thought I was afraid of love. I wasn't. I was afraid of being truly seen. She mentioned her mother, the ballet dancer who once told her, "Grace's pain, hidden well." She confessed to days of unbearable loneliness, to times she would walk into rooms full of people and still feel like a ghost, to waking up unsure of why she was still trying. But there were moments, God, there were moments I felt real. When I watched the sun rise after a night shoot, when a fan said I helped them survive, when I saw someone like Emery and knew the fire hadn't gone out, Toward the end, her voice cracked. There was a rustle. Maybe she was holding something. A letter, a photograph. Then, if you're young and lost and feel like there's no script for someone like you, write your own. And if you're old and tired and full of regret, know that the story isn't over until you say it is. A pause. Then the last words on the tape. I hope I left behind more light than shadow. I hope someone hears this and chooses to stay. The tape ended with a soft click. Sophie didn't speak for several minutes afterward. Neither did the executor. There was nothing left to say. But outside, the wind kept blowing through the open window, across the old piano, and over the carved wooden box now sitting quietly on the desk. Vivienne had spoken, and the world would never see her the same again. When the final inventory of Vivienne Cole's estate was released to the public, journalists expected a few fading mementos and maybe a posthumous autobiography draft. What they got was something far deeper. In addition to her personal belongings in the now-famous journals, a quiet storm of information poured from people who had never before spoken about Vivienne. Letters surfaced from addiction recovery centers, handwritten thank you notes to Miss C, who had anonymously funded full scholarships for women seeking long-term treatment. A small women's film collective in Toronto revealed that she had funded nearly all their equipment under the name GHL, her birth initials. Even more striking were the letters. Hundreds of them. Most were unsent, stuffed in shoe boxes and file folders labeled by year. Letters to Charlotte, to her mother, to roles she wished she'd taken, and most heartbreakingly, to a child she never had. In one, dated 2003, she wrote, I dreamt of your voice again last night. You had her laugh, my mother's, and you asked me if I was proud of who I became. I couldn't answer. Not because I wasn't, but because I didn't know who I was when the cameras weren't rolling. The media began to change their tone. Headlines that once praised her beauty began honoring her bravery. Documentaries cropped up not about her style or the mystery of her death, but about the woman who turned pain into art and silence into grace. Emery Park, now an emerging actress in her own right, would later say in an interview, she didn't leave me money. She left me a mirror, a roadmap, and a reminder that even if no one claps, your story still matters. Vivienne's journals, after careful curation by her estate, were turned into a foundation, one that offered mentorship, therapy grants, and writing residencies for women in the arts. In the end, Vivienne Cole was more than the sum of her performances. She was a woman who took every shattered part of herself and made something lasting. Her legacy isn't in the roles she played. It's in the truths she finally shared. Vivienne once said, the greatest role I ever played was the woman I let the world believe I was. Now we know better. She was brilliant. She was broken. And in the end, she was just real.